Hi, Trista. I'm gonna make you a co-host so that you can share your screen.
Perfect.
And Stephen, I'm gonna make you co-host.
Okay, thank you. Hi, Amy.
Good to see you.
Nice to see you. It's great to see you. Hi, Trista. My name is Steve.
Hi, nice to meet you.
I'm not sure if we've ever met before.
I'm not sure if we have either. Your name looks familiar, but I'm not sure if we've
This
actually.
is my first young adult literature conference, so yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Excellent. Yeah, I think
All right.
Trista, I think maybe we've met at NCTE, but I don't think I've met Stephen before.
Amy,
Yeah, we've met.
I feel like I know you, Amy, somehow just through academic work, maybe. And for some reason, I think you're always coming up on my Facebook page for me to be friends with you. So we might have to be, I think it was Facebook.
Add me on Facebook.
I will. Now that I know the face, I definitely will. So it's like the internet has introduced me to you in the background. So
Are you at Kennesaw?
yes, I'm at Kennesaw State. I'm entering my 4th year, which is crazy. So unusual with COVID. You know, I taught for a year and a half, and then we had COVID, and now all of a sudden it's my 4th year. I'm like, what? It's been a year and a half. How did this happen? So
Yeah. You know, after the last 18 months, what is time anymore?
exactly, I know. And I've already kind of thought that in the first place. What is time? It's a matter of perspective. All right, welcome everyone. Hi, Tristian.
Hey, Stephen, how are you?
I am great. I fixed my hair. I haven't looked at it in a long time.
Let's all take a moment to do that.
Take a moment. Let's just the eyebrows. Nose hair. No.
Hello to all of you, Jennifer, Trista.
Hey.
Hey,
Trista, is that how you say your name?
Trista. Yep.
Good deal. Good deal.
How
So
do
I
you say
think
your name?
It's you did it well. I always tell folks, if you dare to roll your R's, it's Christian.
Okay.
But folks, then the second choice is Christian.
Okay.
And then my lazy colleagues now just say Christian. And
Okay.
and somehow with that name, I'm okay with that.
Okay. That's
So-
good. I have my
Wow.
own name issues too.
I don't know how it is I'm admitting people to this space right now.
We
So
already
very-
set you up.
Oh, I made you co-host. Maybe that's letting you do it.
Oh, Amy, okay. I mean, you got to give the middle-aged woman a heads up because all of a sudden I'm feeling really powerful.
I can admit the people from the waiting room. No, I made
No,
you
I
co-host. Jen.
Do it. I was just like surprised.
What's going on here? No, I made you co-host, Jen, in case you need to share your screen.
We
Thank you.
do, but can you make Steve co-host because I trust him better for screen sharing than I do myself?
Yep, I've made you both co-hosts.
Okay.
So
Yes.
whoever
Um,
wants to share the screen can.
you know, I just told him you do that, please. Oh, Steve, I'm going to put our link to our folder in as well. Bear
I
with.
put it in the chat already, or not to the folder. Yeah, I did not do that.
Okay, that's what I was trying to do. Y'all will, I mean, like I am a tech person, friends, but I have not had to teach synchronously. So
Wow.
that's a different ball game.
It takes some
Yeah.
getting used to, that's for sure.
For so many of our folks I'm in Northern Virginia, today was the last day of school.
Oh, yes. I have a friend who teaches in Virginia, and it just surprises me how long he'll go.
Yeah. We start later, but yeah, it seems a good 2 weeks too long, but it's just that it's that June versus May orientation.
Yeah.
So we have just another minute or so. I think we start, it's 4:30 my time, 1:30 Las Vegas time. Yes.
Yes. And Trista, did we decide we were going to break it up in 20-minute intervals each? Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
And mine may even be a little bit shorter than 20, but I figure that opens us all up for more discussion anyway. So
Yeah. I think Steve and I are more discussion oriented people like you. So that's never a bad thing.
Good. I will, if it's okay, I'll just put in the chat. I mean, do you want me to do a 5 minute, a 3 minute, 1 minute, or just something much less complicated? Just to you though.
You can just say, Jen, you've only got 2 minutes left. I mean, I am middle-aged. I'm just blaming, everyone blames things on COVID. I just blame it all on being middle-aged. This is why I can't monitor chat very well while also
That's
talking.
I will. I'll give you a heads up. I'll wave at you.
Okay.
In that moment, it won't be me being friendly. It will be me saying, "Hey, heads up." Got a couple
Okay.
minutes.
And like I said, don't hesitate to verbally call me out. I was asking just so I could also sort of keep an eye on time.
Sure.
And hey,
sure.
hey, Brian Crandall.
It is.
Brian just got bonus points. Sorry.
Sorry,
No worries.
the dog is
Wearing that hat.
computer keys.
That was funny.
So
It's 4:30. Let's get started because I really want to hear this good work. So just a couple of notes. My name is Christian Zenkov. I'm a professor at George Mason University, and actually just really glad to be here. Glad that I was voluntold by Steve that I needed to chair a session. Really, I mean that sincerely, because it makes me attend more. Just a note that this session is being recorded, and so I'm hoping that's not an issue for anyone. If you have questions along the way, content questions, please put them in the chat. I'll do my best to monitor and keep track. We will save questions until the end of the two presentations. We've got two presentations, 20 minutes each, hoping that we'll save about 20 minutes for us to have a conversation, speak to those questions. I'm happy to read the questions as they come in, or share them at the end. But otherwise, I think that's kind of it. If you're not presenting, if you would just stay muted, so that if there's any sudden background noise, it doesn't distract us, the presenters. I think that's it. Yes.
sure.
All right.
Jennifer and Stephen, it's your show.
Oh yeah.
Okay. This is, I will just say I know a lot of you, and for those of you I don't know, this is one of my most exciting places to be anytime we can come together in the young adult lit community. So I'm Jennifer Dail. I am a professor of English education at Kennesaw State University, and I also direct our National Writing Project site, the Kennesaw Mountain Writing Project. And I'm presenting with my friend Steve.
Thank you. And I'm Steve Goss, and I also teach at Kennesaw State. I'm an assistant professor, and I focus a lot on publishing student work via public art. So we create something and put it in a public space. And Jen and I have been working on different projects together and kind of blending our expertise. Jen?
Okay, so this project is a work in progress, and it came about. I'm in a bit of a different situation for those who don't know me, in that COVID did not really send me into a teaching tailspin because I have taught online for 7 years. But my challenge is I've taught asynchronously. And one of the challenges at our university, Steve hasn't encountered this being a newer professor, but for our online courses, we at one point had to undergo Quality Matters certification. So there were pretty rigid expectations about what an online course might look like, even, and it's asynchronous for our grad program mostly. So there were challenges around that, but as our quality matters has started to fall away, not that we don't care about quality, let me be clear about that, but those requirements that are sort of were structured around the quality matters program and criteria started to fall away as we moved away from that as a university. I had more space going into COVID to start to experiment with my teaching and what I thought would work well in these online spaces. And asynchronous presents a really different challenge than presenting synchronously with students. So we, Steve and I found ourselves, I did this work also with young adult lit this spring, but we're going to talk about it in the specific context of one of our graduate teacher education courses on teaching literature, where we did take up some young adult lit with them, but it was also focused very much on theory and practice in teaching literature. So we wanted to think about, we both taught sections of this course. I taught 2 and Steve taught 1. And we wanted to think about ways that we could actively engage our students rather than just always writing a post in response to a reading discussion question or always posting to Flipgrid. And we wanted to connect them with each other more, because I was tired of seeing students go through our programs and say, well, I never knew Steve Goss. I saw his name in my classes, but we never connected or we never talked or whatever that might be. And the fact that we had 3 sections going speaks to a very large incoming group. So I saw it as an opportunity also to start to build some community among a cohort coming through. So I had done literature circles with my students, and when I taught in the classroom, I'd done them when I taught middle school, when I taught face-to-face undergrads, and when I taught face-to-face grad students. But those roles aren't always appropriate for grad students, right? I'm working on a huge assumption here, so you can interrupt us if you aren't familiar with Harvey Daniels' literature circle roles. But we wanted to sort of rethink those. So we want to invite you to drop some quick comments in the chat in response to our quick discussion prompt here. And that is, what is your experience with lit circles in synchronous and or asynchronous classrooms? And to take a moment to think and share your thoughts in the chat. And if you are really feeling moved, you can unmute and just shout it out to the void of us here in Zoom.
I'll shout it out.
Shout it out.
Yeah, we had a wonderful experience doing book groups with Punch in the Air, and students, we had sort of a role. We did one way with no roles, and it was just kind of based on the reading, and another time with roles, and then we created this like fishbowl experience using the spotlights feature on the Zoom. So people were, having conversations in the Zoom, and then there were people on the outside just listening, kind of debriefing, and so many of the students said they really preferred the roles because they felt like it was very clear what they needed to be doing. And so much of the conversation was like a jump rope, like people are twirling and they're like, when do I jump in? And I don't want to ruin the flow, that kind of thing. But it was a joy, way better than I thought it would be.
That's awesome. Yeah, I like that you use that phrase fishbowl with Zoom. We'll talk a bit about what it looked like asynchronously, and we use that term fishbowl with our students too, but it looked a bit different. Basically, I'll just say it now because time might run out and I don't want to promise something and not deliver. So basically we had them record their discussions on a assigned Flipgrid, and they were accountable for viewing the posted discussions, and we told them they created their own Zoom spaces because we were asynchronous, and we instructed them to act like they were in a fishbowl. So I see a lot of people in the chat saying that they do these every now and then. Maybe they don't do them enough. Talking about modeling, rarely using roles, but transactional and critical literacy discussion structure. And Jen, yeah, I would love to get away from roles, but I also find sometimes the roles helps when even with grad students, when we're starting something new, they are so anxious sometimes that just being in an online space, that anxiety can take over.
Mhm.
So it's awesome if you've gotten them away from roles. I would love to get there. So lots of different responses here. I can't read them all, but anyway, they're there for us all to see.
Okay.
Okay, so Steve, you want to talk about some of the quick why?
Yeah, so why lit circles? I think, you can read these different citations here, but for me, it was really a way to not only to get into the literature, but open up dialogic space within my classroom and give students a chance to, first of all, be heard. So they created something and we're meeting in a group and we're heard by each other, but then they met in these reading groups and were able to communicate face to face. So it gave them content and something to really hold on to. And they were actually teaching each other different aspects of the different texts that we were teaching. Jen?
Yeah. Okay, I was reading comments, Steve, if I'm being honest.
No problem. Sorry, that was a
Trying to
fast
respond to
comeback at
comments.
you.
So
All right.
we took time to sort of rethink the traditional lit circle roles collaboratively and just what that might look like in teacher ed courses. So if Steve will advance the slide, we'll talk about, we're skipping around a little because
We're
of
just gonna
time
go right
constraints.
to here.
So we did keep the visualizer role, which Harvey Daniels has, but we asked them to be a bit more sophisticated about it, right? So you can see the summary of these roles here, but we did ask for some writing, but we also asked that they keep their writing really concise. I found in an online space, English ed grad students, imagine this, have a lot to say. And so teaching them to write concisely and distill their ideas, which they're going to have to do for dissertations and capstone projects anyway, is something that I really have to steer them towards. I don't know if Steve had that experience. So we sort of put some parameters there on
Absolutely.
what they wrote for being visualizer. The word diver was not just like the traditional vocabulary chaser. We asked them to really take a deep dive on the words, give some etymology, some behind the scenes development of the word, and then to dive in about it in context. And it's not very often, some of them, that they encounter words they don't know. A lot of them I learned encounter words they don't know, but are scared to admit they don't know them. So this was a good safe space for students to maybe take a deep dive if they didn't know a word and not have to own they didn't know it publicly, but also to just challenge their own assumptions about what a word means, right? And that's really what the deep dive was about.
I found this one to be magical, the results, and we'll talk more.
It was
All right,
really
not
fun.
navigating. There we go.
Okay, and then we had an elevator picture, and we thought back to what we were both told when we did our dissertations. You've got to get that down to the elevator pitch, just a couple minutes, can't hold people hostage. I'm married to a PhD in science, and everything's a dissertation with him. And I'm like, I need it short. I need the elevator pitch. And that's, so we were trying to get them to distill the big ideas of these theoretical readings, especially, down and present them in layman's terms to the class and get the jargon out of it. And we gave them, we didn't say for any of these roles, this is what your product has to look like. We left it very open-ended, and the creativity, for me, that's what was magical. I mean, and of course, students start to follow suit after they see others post the first examples after a round of lit circles. But this came up in the first round where students actually sort of put up a video of like an elevator door opening, and they're like, oh, by the way, while I have you here, let me tell you about blah, blah, blah. And that was a very creative and sort of fun, engaging way to approach it. And then we had the arbiter, and we talked about, this is where you have ultimate authority and your views have influence over trends. And so we want them to work on becoming an arbiter for the theory and identify who the experts are. Now, when I moved this into my young adult lit class this spring, I dropped the arbiter. We visited it for outside of lit circles, just the idea of being an arbiter at your school for making literature selections and being a proponent for certain works you want in the classroom because it was a multicultural lit class. And I changed the arbiter in this class to a classroom connector, asking them to start to think about connections between other texts, both professional, young adult lit, poems, videos, things like that, that they might bring into the classroom, into that discussion to enrich it. I feel like I'm talking very fast. I'm sorry. So Steve's going to take us through some examples.
Yeah, so this is an example from one of my students. We had just read an Appleby text, and if you look here, she kind of visualized what the books and what kind of what shows up in our curriculum. It was curriculum as conversation, I believe, what we read, but she wrote, "My picture represents the idea from Appleby's text that literature is such a huge part of the English classroom. According to the reading, most of the class time is spent on teaching literature over other English concepts such as writing and grammar. Other books, I've drawn small faces to represent other aspects of the text. The books that are standing have pictures of white men to represent authors, while the books laying on their side represent women and minority authors. The texts claim to have more access to the books written by white males, perhaps due to how they're handled over the years." So we found that these kind of pictures are quick. They can put them up on the screen and then instantly start having a conversation without having to go too deep into the text yet, right? So she can show that, give her presentation, and start a deep conversation. Jen? Oh, here's another one. I'm sorry. This is another visualization of the same text. So this student kind of made this timeline here, and she's drawing our attention to the cyclical nature of curriculum and the different things that come up and go away in education. As anyone who's been in it for a little while, we realize trends come and go, and then they sometimes reemerge. And if you look here, unfortunately, some of these trends just seem not to go away over time. Jen, word diver?
So this is just an example of a word diver response. And this probably actually wasn't my favorite one, but it's a really good example. I had students in my sections who set up charts where they sort of, and these charts weren't the same, but it helped them organize their thinking around a word and its uses and its etymology and evolution. So this is just an example.
Yeah, one example, and the word here is framework. So the most common definition refers to structure for enclosing or supporting, deriving from frame. But if one digs a little bit deeper, framework has a more significant and beautiful application to literature. Harper hits upon the 12th century reference of the word, which refers to text, or text meaning to weave, to fabricate, to make wicker or wattle framework. If we apply that meaning to Appleby, literature becomes much less industrial, institutional, and linear, and becomes more of an art form. Using more of an artistic, weaving, fluid approach to build literacy frameworks might change the way we teach. Let's see if I can get this to work. This is a video here. All right, elevator picture. I'm just going to play the video, Jen, if that's okay with you.
Go for it, just a quick clip.
Yeah, one interesting thing that happened. Okay, one interesting thing that happens with elevator pictures, my students at least, all of a sudden created an audience, and often it was a colleague. So they imagined that they were speaking to someone directly.
I'm not hearing the audio, Steve.
You're not hearing the audio?
No.
Okay, well, I'm hearing it. We did paste in the link to our presentation, and it is in there. But essentially, she is talking to one of her colleagues, trying to expand their understanding of the curriculum and really start to fight for new text within that curriculum. So that's the quick recap. And then you can see on the right-hand side, our student wrote a little kind of reasoning of why she created it, and she explains some of her anger after reading the text as well. Okay. Jen, arbiter?
You can go for it with this one, and then I'll wrap us up.
All right, so the cool thing about the arbiter role is that the students broke it up into 3 different parts. So first they talked about the theorists. So this student just kind of recaps the different theory that was involved in that particular week's reading. And then they talk about practitioners, and they try to connect it with actual classroom practitioners who have also written research on the topic and how they're taking up those different theories in the classroom, what they look like in practice. And if you see here, there's some writing here about this English as citizenship in education, and argue that English education has to be a marriage between classical English classroom and contemporary approaches. And in the end, we were talking at the very end, what is the best methods to deliver English to a diverse group of students? And then the last part of the response is what they're going to actually do in the classroom, connecting it to one classroom strategy. So a classroom strategy relevant to this topic is teach the process, not the product. Teaching the process means that the educator emphasizes steps on how the student arrives at a work product or through or thought over the actual result. So something more important than just the result, it's the process that matters most. In a classroom where the process is emphasized over product, the student receives direct instruction on how to complete each step of the pre-writing process and submit work for feedback from teachers and peers. Students receive a grade for the final product, but the true learning experience comes from learning and perfecting the pre-writing process to create more writing products in the future. So we can really see them then kind of see how they're going to fit it into their classroom, what it means for them.
So what we were going to invite you to do, but time's not going to permit, but I'm redropping, as I have learned through chat features, we need to remind people of resources because it's so easy to get lost when the chat keeps scrolling. So I've dropped our link here again. In our folder, we had put 3 excerpts from authors who are featured here this week: Sharon Flake, The Skin I'm In; Ellen Hopkins, We'd Use People Kill People; and K.A. Holt, We'd Use Redwood and Ponytail. Excerpts from those. And we were going to invite you into a Jamboard space to sort of respond, taking up a role that you might want to experiment or tinker with here in this space. And this is such a short time to just drop information at you, and it had been our goal to sort of transition and show you how it connected with some young adult lit. But I also think it's important, because so many of us are teacher educators, to think about how we can engage our students with the research in practical ways, and then get them to take it back to their classroom. We also invite emails to continue the discussion, and we'll be checking back into the space, so feel free to tinker and drop some thoughts in there on the Jamboard as well.
If I can just say one more thing, I just, before we just go to the very end, I love this idea of meeting face-to-face. I found that in my asynchronous classes, they created that content, right? There's different roles, and then they really wanted to meet. They became their own little experts in their own way, and they had a reason to come together. And it really drove these they've met in small groups, face-to-face meetings. And these are kind of the results. This is from Jen's class. Of these students were having a discussion and presenting to their class during this discussion. It's actually a half an hour long video, kind of video podcast kind of thing. And they each went through their different roles. And then at the very end, they brought all their roles together, and then they had discussion questions for the entire class. So it kind of, again, it's making these kind of deeper social connections. And I always find that learning happens best when it's social and when we're not just in our little silos.
Thanks for listening, friends.
Yes,
and for
thank you,
interacting
everyone.
In the chat. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Jennifer and Stephen. I'm afraid I let you down at the start as a chair. We usually do, and some of my students from George Mason University are here, we usually do pre-applause. So this is pre-applause, rolling into post-applause. Thank you. Rolling into pre-applause for Trista. It's the Trista show. Take it away.
Stephen, are you still sharing?
Yes, I am. Hold on 1 second. Okay.
Oh, okay. All right. So I did already, I can see some of you are on here. I did already drop the link to slides. You know, I taught on Zoom so much, but now that I'm like presenting, it feels so different. Okay. So my name is Trista Owczarzak. I just finished my 8th year of teaching high school English. I am also a grad student at UW-Milwaukee pursuing my master's in library and information science. So I tell people I'm an English teacher by nature, but a wannabe librarian. So that is where I'm at right now. Please, I'll post this information at the end as well, but please do not hesitate to email or reach out on Twitter, Instagram. So my focus today is to share recipes for teaching young adult lit in high school without feeling like you have to start from scratch from what you've already taught. I teach in the village of Oakfield, which has a population of about 1,100 or just under 1,100. For anyone familiar with Wisconsin, I'm near Fond du Lac, but really a better point of reference is that I'm about 70 miles north of Milwaukee. Really, Oakfield around here is mostly known for a tornado that demolished most of the village back in '96. There's a picture of my high school. My classroom where I'm sitting right now is on the far left. But then looking out of my classroom window is the sheep farm in that top picture. Before they did some rearranging at the farm, you could actually hear the sheep if I had my classroom windows open, to give you a little bit of an idea of where I am. District-wide, we have about 541 students, about 150 9 through 12. Our graduating class last week was 41 students. Predominantly white, very rural, very much a farming area. So my goal is to just share a sample of how to approach young adult lit in the high school classroom. I've taught it as an independent elective, but I've also taught it within other classes. So my goal is that what I share today kind of could be used anywhere. I'm hopeful that you leave with some ideas for how to pull one of these units or to structure a course. But then with any of these conversations come the challenges of bringing these into the classroom. I have taught a young adult literature semester-long elective 4 times, and each of the 4 times was very, very different. The very first time that I taught it, it was based mostly on student choice. We did a lot of independent reading and projects, and then kind of the thematic focus for the semester was identity and perceptions. The second time that I taught it, I had 6 students in the class. They were all freshmen. And so for that one, we organized things more with small group projects, author studies, and kind of went by genre. The third time I taught it, I had a student teacher, and we also had a much, much different dynamic in the class. Because it's an elective and we're a small school, sometimes our electives end up being sort of a dumping ground for those that have nowhere else to be that hour, which completely changed the dynamic of the classroom. So for that semester, we ended up with more whole class reads, projects, and discussions that way. Plus then throw in halfway through, we went completely virtual with the pandemic. So that also completely changed things. And then this past semester, I taught in thematic units with a lot of small group book clubs and a lot of project-based assessments. So each version really was based on the students I had in the room at the time. This past semester, I had 11 students. I am incredibly lucky to have very small class sizes, especially in electives. It was a mix of grades 9 through 12. Of that 11, I had 2 that remained fully virtual all semester with 9 in person. So once we were in person, I was teaching simultaneously those 2 that were virtual with everyone else in person all at the same time. And I'm sure some of you can relate to that challenge. Just as a little bit of background for our district, for this second semester, 8 weeks of it was hybrid, where my high schoolers were in person 2 to 3 days a week, opposite of our middle schoolers. We're a 612 building. And then the last 10 weeks of the semester, we were completely in person outside of those 2 virtual students. I had a 90-minute block every other day this year because of our response to COVID. Every single class period, there was time allotted for reading. There was usually some small group discussion. We did some reading and writing reflections, some mini lessons and activities, and then work time on their projects or assignments, to give you an idea of how it was structured. So menu item 1, this is supposed to be recipes for success. So the first item on the menu, I started this past semester with completely free choice independent reading. I shouldn't say completely free choice. It had to be young adult literature, but they had a chance to explore a favorite genre or author, or try something new. And we discussed what they enjoy reading, but then also did some surveying on topics and themes that they wanted to explore further. So I gave them a bit of that ownership in what topics we would cover as a class. And it also bought me some time to actually get the copies of the books that I needed for future units. I really did not plan the whole semester ahead of time. Outside of this first independent reading unit, I kind of let them choose their own adventure as a group. So the final project for that unit was to do a book talk to share with their classmates. They recorded those, which was also easy for us being virtual some of the time. Menu item 2, our first book club unit focused on mental health. For this one, I used Finding Audrey, Challenger Deep, and Twisted. The students, in addition to reading the books and discussing how mental illness was presented in their book, they did some of their own research and learning on the actual science of that mental illness. And then their final project was to create an informative and supportive poster for our building, having to do with mental health and how to combat that stigma against mental illness. I'll talk a little bit at the end about how I chose the books that I chose, but we can also discuss that a bit after. Menu item 3, focused on grief and loss. I used I Am Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter, They Both Die at the End, and Everything All at Once. In this one, the groups discussed how grief was treated by their characters. Because of a lot of loss that students have experienced, I hesitated to lean too much into their own experiences and try to focus more on how characters dealt with things. But obviously, groups kind of grappled with some of that as well. And then in the end, students wrote eulogies, and I gave them complete free choice on who or what the eulogy was for. So it could have been for a real person, could also have been for one of the characters in this book or a different book. An animal, something completely different. I had actually suggested one of them, like, oh yes, like I'm writing a eulogy for my old car that died last year, that kind of a thing. So they were not tied into anything too personal. The next menu item, we of course did a unit on race and justice, which led to some challenging but beneficial conversations. I used A Song Below Water, On the Come Up, and Dear Martin for this one. We discussed as a class and did some more whole class activities focusing on the terms labels, assumptions, and stereotypes, and what those mean for us, what those mean for others in our school, and then also what those mean in the wider world, considering we are a very small town and very rural, trying to connect it to that bigger picture for them. To end this one, we created #UsVersusHate projects. If you have not ever explored their resources, I encourage you to do so. I included the link on here. But they created posters and other visuals that kind of encompassed the message of us versus hate and how we combat hate in all ways and in all forms. And so I should have included some of their examples. Their posters were incredible, but I don't have them right here. So that was the ending for that one, but that website also has lesson plan ideas that I would encourage you to check out. Menu item 5 had to do with relationships / coming of age, kind of culminating together. I used Jackpot, Simon versus the Homo sapiens agenda, and With the Fire on High. For this one, students discussed how relationships were presented in the book. They also discussed the positive and negative effects of some of those more major and more minor relationships throughout the books. We were nearing the end of the year for this one, and because I really wanted students to have that engagement and enjoyment piece in it, as we started this one, or we're getting ready to, I looked at the group and said, well, what do we want to do with this? And one or two of them suggested doing a scavenger hunt. It turned out to be my absolute favorite project of the entire semester. And I looked at them and I said, you know, I'm busy, you're busy, help me create the scavenger hunt, because I don't know where to start. And so a student actually sat down and made a list of like 12 to 15 things to look for in each of their books. So it was completely student created. And then to give them kind of something to do with it or a way to present it, they created lap books with what they found. So there was like the first piece of finding it throughout their book, discussing it as a group, but then also individually sharing their findings. So here were some of their final products. And since I am at school and I did, I do have some of them handy. So this was one of my favorites, but they made it super interactive. So each of the pieces that they were looking for on their scavenger hunt, they could present however they wanted. So like this one has a scroll that flips down and things to open. Another one that was really cool, they made like pockets. So they had to find things that made them laugh. And so this was their like section of laughs that you can just like pull out the passages from the book that made them laugh. So this is an easy way to tie it to standards as well. They were kind of analyzing, but having a little bit of fun, seeking the things that they needed to find throughout their book as well. All right, last menu item was kind of relationships part 2, relationships continued. This was our very last unit of the year. So we were all a bit fried and all a bit burnt out. So mostly I said, here are 4 really great books. Choose one of them and we'll read it and just kind of do the things and make it to the end of the year. So the options for this one were Love, Hate, and Other Filters, Frankly in Love, Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe, and American Panda. So we continued the discussions about relationships. They had the chance to compare some of those to the relationships in the previous book that they had read. And then in lieu of a final project for this one, we actually took a little field trip across the street to our elementary school and raided the elementary school library and raided some of the books that are available in our elementary classrooms. And they book talked their favorites from upper elementary, and we recorded them on Flipgrid. We have some new elementary teachers coming in next year. And so it was a great way to kind of book talk and promote some of those reads that are available in the elementary classrooms. Some challenges or suggestions. Start small. Not everyone is teaching, I know, a whole YA Lit class. So my suggestion, if you're using any of these things, is just change one unit or theme to cover next year and to use what you already have. A lot of the choices for books that I used this year were ones that either I used in other classes or like Dear Martin and Twisted were ones that I use in my freshman English. But because I had a small group, they didn't all read those as freshmen. So I could pull and kind of recycle those into my YA Lit class for some of the other students. I also raid other classroom libraries in my classroom library to try to come up with enough copies for groups. So I encourage you to use your other teachers. I am lucky to be able to rely on my local public library. It's only a couple of blocks away from here. But I've learned I have a teacher library account, and all I have to do is email the librarian and say, I need 5 copies of this, 6 copies of this, 3 copies of that. What can you do? And 9 times out of 10, she can interlibrary loan enough copies. And because it's a teacher account, I don't get charged late fees. So that has worked. Obviously, you have to like trust your students, bring them back, but knock on wood, that has mostly worked out. Shop around for the most inexpensive options or buying them gradually in order to bring them in. Consider your individual students, their needs. I will tell you, it was okay to make it student-led because the student recommendations were by far the best part of this class. So don't feel like you have to plan it all ahead. Sometimes it's okay to let that go. I have no idea how I'm doing on time, but here's my contact info again. So please don't hesitate to reach out. And these are my pictures. Oh, perfect, 5 minutes. That was about right. These are just some pictures from when I presented at the YA Summit in 2018, the last time I was able to be in person. So those are some of my favorite memories.
Thank you, Trista. Applause, please. Applause, please. I will say from both of you that the resources are astonishing. And the fact that y'all are just sharing your presentations and the resources, images, ideas, links, etc., so freely. I know it's what teachers do, we as teachers do, but goodness, I'm sure at least my students who are here literally in this session are copying everything. So thank you. So I tried to keep track of the questions, and I only noticed 2. And yes, one of these is meant to be mildly humorous, but it seemed serious at the time. Brian posted, "What's life without Crayola crayons?" I'm not sure we could address that. But then maybe the big question that arose was regarding lit circles, and what I would say is to roll or not to roll. And obviously, I don't really mean that, but clearly it's something that a lot of us teachers, teacher educators struggle with, wonder about. So if other folks want to toss questions in the chat or just speak up, please feel free. And I'd also invite Jennifer and Stephen jump in.
I would say about, oh, sorry, Steve.
Can I go, Jennifer?
Yeah, go.
I loved how both of these mesh together really well. I think that they're match made in heaven. But I want to know if Stephen and Jennifer, if you've experienced any students who've been able to enact some of the things that Trista is talking about, because I think it's a move that might be coming in school districts that get some leeway to do that. But I'm wondering how many of us have had students who've conducted a unit where there was choice on young adult literature, let alone a whole elective, because I think it's pretty courageous, right? And I know in the school district here, you might just function fending off censorship committees. But anyway, good job both. And I'd like to hear you guys respond to the challenges of really enacting lit circles around choice, or, things around young adult literature.
Sure. So one, I want to go back to roll or not to roll. I love that wording of it. That I ideally would start with roles just as a scaffolding support structure and get students to where they're pulling it away. One thing I loved about Trista's presentation was the way she involved students in helping create and direct things such as the scavenger hunt. And I would love to involve students in thinking through what roles might look like now that they're more comfortable with them and doing them in the online space, or even what those structures might look like. Now, Steve, to answer your question about choice and things in school districts and Metro Atlanta school districts, remember, we are in the Southeast, we are in a state that just went blue. So there's a lot of censorship. We still get books like Night by Eli Wiesel censored in our school systems. And so the idea, man, of having a young adult lit class that's choice, that's like when I'm the queen of my own small island, that's how things would go down. I'd be doing the work Trista's doing. But our teachers, we do have some who are brave enough and experienced enough to make some savvy arguments for doing a unit that brings in some choice. They still have to be cognizant of their text selection. And I fear that that's going to become more true in our school districts in Metro Atlanta, because 2 of them are working on policies right now to get critical race theory and other things out of the classroom.
And I just want to add, I think, the role of elevator pitcher, my students were enacting these conversations that they were hoping to have with administrators and with other English teachers to get new literature, to make these arguments for electives and things like that. So it was kind of an unintended result of this. I didn't expect my students to take up theory in that way, but they did. So I'm interested in like future research to kind of look at that and like how did it go after, you know, they said these things in these elevator pitches and in their writing. What did that mean when they returned to their classroom? Because they were all active classroom teachers.
I'll say for me, kind of building this, I get a little bit of choice. I'm really lucky to get a little bit of choice in the electives that I teach. And so I pushed a handful of years ago to bring the young adult lit class into fruition. I also, I maintain strong relationships with my administrators, and I kind of do the like ask forgiveness, not permission route, which I don't always recommend. It's just work okay for me. But I do try to keep that strong rationale in mind. I chose each of these books with intention, and just being able to articulate that if and when the time comes. I also, for my young adult lit class especially, I mean, I offer choice in my other classes, but especially for the young adult lit class, I send home with the syllabus at the beginning of the semester a list of possible books that students may read. I encourage, like some semesters have and some semesters have not had parents actually sign off, you know, to say that either A, they need to know what they're reading ahead of time, or B, they're good to go, just to kind of cover my back end that way. So that's something I would definitely encourage people to do as they bring these in as well, just kind of getting or I'll even send an email at the beginning of the year to all my freshman parents and just say, here's a list of possible choices. Feel free to check them out. You're welcome to read them along with your child at any point. And if I don't hear back, then I'm good to go. So I think that has been kind of my approach, which is maybe not the safest.
Others want to jump in? You can respond to that roll versus not to roll or not to roll question, or really anything.
I'm gonna, while people think, I'm gonna drop my email address again in the chat box. I always love following up with people. It takes so much time to digest in these short spaces, and I would love to hear what people are trying in their classrooms this fall and how they're thinking about this stuff, and even possible collaborations, because Steve and I are still working on all of this.
I'm going to do the same because I would love to connect with other people, or even collaborate and team teach between our schools on different books. I love doing that kind of thing. So I put mine in the chat as well.
Me too. I did the same.
Thank you. Officially, we have 4 minutes. Let's take advantage of it. Someone, a question, a comment, you name it.
I can say that Steve and I are very passionate about supporting teachers in our teacher educator roles and helping think through strong pedagogy. And we are passionate about being in classrooms with teachers and collaborating with teachers, even virtually, which I think hopefully the pandemic may help us all think about that a bit differently as well. So that's something Steve and I definitely bring to the table and would love to support anyone in those ways and learn from all of you in those ways. It's Friday afternoon, and if you're on the East Coast, it's like after 5. I mean, I'm like going to give my East Coast pizza pass.
I'm going to go with we are masters of wait time, and it is 5:17 here on the East Coast. I think you're doing beautiful work. Thank you so much for these presentations. You've given us a lot. I think it's okay if we wrap a few minutes early.
Yeah, and thank you everyone for being here. Like everyone just said, it's getting late, and I just really appreciate your presence and just your effort during this conference. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
super
saw
quick, Victoria. I
Victoria's.
said that. Yes, me too. Please email me. Please, please, please email me.
Can I just say one thing about the roles, to roll or not to roll? We never actually addressed that question. I like to start off with guided roles, but I think in my future iterations of this, I do want students to have their own chance to create their own roles. And I've done this in other kind of projects that were similar, and I find that they are sometimes the greatest roles that are out there. We were doing like critical lenses, and my students created their own gender lens, and it wasn't one that I had, and they created this new gender lens, and now I'm using it with my students. So some of the best stuff then is generated from them, and then they can make it their own and kind of tweak it to their own group purposes.
See, we do very similar thing. My co-teacher in our young adult lit courses here, Michelle Legue, in the first week of our course, we do traditional lit circle roles. And the following 4 weeks of it, it's just a 5-week summer class. It's anything but lit circle roles. So you got to come up with other ones, or else.
Someone asked about lit circles and how we created the groups. I don't know about you, Jen,
Yeah.
but when I created the groups, I instantly knew there was some students that were really on top of the coursework. There was like always like 4 or 5 that were emailing me right away, even before the semester started. I kind of set them as kind of group leaders in my mind, and then I shuffled in other people into these group roles. That's how I did it at first. It's kind of a crazy method, but that was it. I just knew there was spearhead people.
I just sent mine forth and said, make up your own groups and share your contact information. And here's some ways you might go about this task of having the discussion and sharing it. But they all chose to record their own discussions, even though I gave them virtual space with me in it.
For my high school groups, I usually book talk each of the books. And then depending with my young adult lit class, it worked out that they just all got to read the one they wanted to read. For my other, like my freshman English and things, I generally kind of look at the groupings and try to take their top 1 or 2 choices and keep those in mind. But I usually assign them for the other classes.
So we've got a great chat conversation going on. I think our time is done. Thank you. We'll stick around for the next sessions. Yeah. Thanks so much, Jennifer, Stephen, Trista.
Thanks, friends. We appreciate your time.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thanks, Trista. Bye-bye.